Hello all, and welcome to my video arguing that Delial is the greatest triple triad player of all time. But first, what is this? And who's that fellow on the right? It's not me. It's a guy named Clayton Crowley who made a video series called Making the Case. In it, he went through 8 different basketball players, making the case for each one that they were the greatest of all time, the GOAT. He didn't set up these arguments just to knock them down and say what he thought was the right answer at the end, but to celebrate each of those exceptional few who he could make a compelling case for, and then he made that case. His desire was that you'd leave each case nodding along and thinking, yep, that guy was the best. But we're not talking about basketball. We're talking about a far more important game, triple triad. So what if we do that for triple triad? What if I talk about the 5 to 8 players that have a legitimate case to be the greatest triple triad player of all time? Well, that's the plan, to do so and make the case for each the best I can. Plus, recently, Homer called my projects the nichest nostalgia on the internet, and that further inspired me to go ahead with this, perhaps even nicher, project. So we return to the brilliant Delial and his case to be the greatest player to ever click a card on Al Gore's internet. Delial started playing competitive triple triad on TTX, a site with very limited rule set options. I believe it was entirely closed randoms. I don't have good records before 2006, so maybe it began before then, but in 2006, Delial started, or continued, winning fun events, often miles ahead of the field. However, the early major tournaments didn't come easily for him, with mostly round 1 exits and an occasional round 2. The tournaments don't tell the whole story though, as Delial, with not a single round 3 finish to his name, was already being described as the poster boy of triple triad. Even before his first good finish, a quarterfinals in Triad Wars 5, everyone knew this guy's way up there. And then, 2007 came around. 2007 was the year of Delial. He began with his Triad Wars quarterfinals, then won Special Edition Kate Sith, and then made the quarters again in the site's 5th championships. This earned him the Player of the Year title and the publicly voted on Open Player of the Year title. He went from 171st highest rated player by ELO rankings, an excellent rating system chess and many other games use that have applied to triple triad tournament history, all the way to 3rd, and was voted by a panel the 8th best player of all time this early into his still very young career. His reputation was sterling too. Sujiro, one of the few voted better by that panel, said, "I don't really see, oh no, he's entering this tournament, except occasional complaints about Delial." Kamikaze, who was largely rated the best player in the world based on tournament results from 05 to 06, said, "Delial has arguably been the best player on the site for a long time." As fantastic as Delial's 2007 was, claiming he became the best in 07, as my numbers imply, surely underrates his dominance. The response to his success from the crowd wasn't, "Wow, incredible, he's shocked the world." It was, "Wow, finally, now there's no doubt, this guy's the greatest." And Deli wanted to compete more. He proposed an alternate league to Clan League where individual players could compete. He explored various rule sets, like playing level 1 to 10 all-rule randoms with only the FF8 deck on against Shuriken. There was a trend growing of players building hands of 4 corners with the same set of 4 numbers on each of the cards that made up the 4 corners, such that they played well off each other, and then one vertical or horizontal card to fill out the hand. This made Delial quite sad. He wanted to experiment and create, and wished others would do the same. How did Delial respond to this success in 2007, to being top of the world? Well, let me read you some quotes. "I'm still in shock, really. I think half of the community had more faith in me winning than I did. Met, D, Kaus Debonair, and of course Kamikaze were all very tough opponents." Well, I'm in TTAC and hoping to do well for that. I'm not really sure beyond that. I still think people make too much out of me, but if I put my mind to it, I can do some good things. I'm really critical of myself and think there's far better players. Spoilers. In a bit, I will be comparing Delial to Michael Jordan, but unlike Jordan, Delial was always shockingly humble. Not in that false sportsmanlike way where you know how to do PR, but in a very generous, kind way. He was remarkably complimentary of the skill of other players, nor did he pretend, as lots of players, myself sometimes included, did in the yearly voting, that other threatening players weren't as good as they were. There's a genuine chance, if he's watching this video, that he's a bit mortified at how much I have and will compliment him. I hope not, though. I just want to celebrate. This brings us to 2008, a year he likely played even better than in 2007. He made semifinals in SE Rhinoa 2, then won both Triad Wars 6 and SE Irvine to become the first player to ever win 3 tournaments. He was rewarded with another Player of the Year, another Open Player of the Year, and locked himself into second on the rating list, as well as being the second player ever to break 2300 rating, only trailing Seto. And don't worry, we will be discussing the Delial vs Seto rivalry, two enormously skilled players. Just look at how ahead of the field they are in the shown chart. But that's just the tournament results. Delial was everywhere in 2008. He was a co-clan leader of Divas and was their best player as they won Clan Wars in 2008. He'd later be a co-clan leader for an Avalanche Clan League win, and I'm sure many other results I don't have the records for. Why wasn't he sole leader? Well, he has been, and here was his description of it. I'll be blunt. It sucked. He made a great co-leader instead. He brought people into the community, pushing Feeling Lucky, Felix, to try out for Triforce, which led to Felix really joining the community. He'd eventually become a moderator and find a relationship in said community. There were some alternate clan scenes going round, and Elysian Fields, the biggest try I'm aware of, had a trade league. Delial crushed it, scoring an absurd 90%. There are only 5 great players who extensively played open trade being a form of triple triad where you risk your cards collection as you play. That I'm aware of, at least. Delial, Karmazin, Diakon Entite, Kana, and Kamikaze. Not only is Delial in that group, but he often played trade, risking rares. The 2009-11 period was less illustrious than the prior years of utter dominance, though he was voted Open Player of the Year for a third consecutive time in 2009. Deli made quarterfinals in Triad Wars 7, Triad Wars 8, the 8th Championships, SE Rufus, and SE Rhinoa 9. Quite impressive, but not a single semi-finals. In an interview with Diakon, Vid, a future tournament winner, questioned if Delial was even a serious threat anymore. Diakon, clearly somewhat confused by this, thought of course he was. Other reviews were more enthusiastic, as Kamikaze again described Delial as arguably the best player in 2010. And Seto, still rated number 1 in the world, said Deli was the only player he feared seeing on his side of the bracket. These positive reviews were much more accurate. Delial was far from done winning tournaments. I think this is a good time to bring up TTN, an alternative spin-off site that tried out different rules in a 4x4 board. Delial was great at TTN and won the 2010 Fun Championships, which required both TTA and TTN success to win. In 2012, In 2012, Delial got back on the board, winning SE Rhinoa 10 and becoming the 3rd player ever to win 4 tournaments, just a month or so after Seto won his 4th. Then Deli had a few poor results before reaching another quarterfinals in Quistis and just one lone quarterfinals in Rhinoa 11 in 2013. Was he done? He was not. He made semifinals in Sephiroth before winning the 12th Site Championships to finally complete the Special Edition Triad Wars and Championship Trifecta, one of 3 players to ever do so. Then he made semifinals in Adia, quarterfinals in the closed tournament Gilgamesh, and finally won the closed tournament Onion Knight. He won his final tournament 9 years after his first. No one else came even close to winning tournaments over such a large stretch. Not even close. Let's talk a little more about TTN. We don't have the records to say much, but what we do have is articles in TTA's fanzine, Occult Fan, and those tell a story of Deli making the finals and often winning everything to do with it. I don't have the records to say more, but I suspect Delial is the most decorated TTN player going. What made Delial so good at Triple Triad? What did he do differently from other players? Here's a great quote from Homer in 2008. I recently played a game against Delial, and I saw that the game was going to be a tie. For his last move, he selected one card, and then picked the other and put it in a strange place. After the game, I asked him why he did it, since it was still a tie. His reply, "You aren't going to make a mistake if I don't give you the chance to." This encapsulates a lot of Delial's play. He didn't just calculate the correct result of the game, but he found the trickiest, easiest to go wrong path to that result. I've talked about his interest in playing a variety of rule sets, including playing on TTN, how he built more creative hands and sought out new ideas, how he dominated high-risk trade games and wanted more ways to compete. He pushed boundaries and tested ideas. He had this incredible intuition. I remember finding a move I was excessively proud of, screenshotting the position before my move, and sending it to Delial. There were cards in 4 and 5, so the typical play for me would have been in 3 or 9. Sometimes 6 is the natural place to go, though it does concede more options. I'd grown more enamored over the years with moves in 1 or 7 in those positions, even when they could take it, as if I go, say, in 1 and they capture from 2, I'd often have a move in 3, securing 2, and with the card in 3, safe from attack. I did very well with these unexpected moves, but here, neither 1 nor 3 worked. If I went 1, they could take with a high enough number facing out I couldn't capture from 3. Instead, my idea was a move in 2, with low value facing towards 3. An incredibly obscure square to play in, as it gives up 1 completely freely, but with the same intent. They go in 1, and I go in 3, securing 2 and 3. I cannot reiterate enough how rarely this type of move was played. About 15 seconds later, Delial messaged something back like, "Dunno, but this move in 2 looks good." This obscure, deranged, offbeat move that is a type of move I suspect most good players have never played even once, Delial found in 15 seconds. He was a really aggressive, forceful, and risky player. This hurt his win rate sometimes as he played moves that required really high precision, but it meant that at his best, he was just spectacular. He had this great feel for the directionality of a game, which cards would matter and which wouldn't. I remember watching him play a random game where he'd first turn and a 5-5 corner on a low-level rule set. That card was untouchable. The opponent not only couldn't take it, but they couldn't possibly set up any of their cards to be able to take it with same or plus. I kept reloading the page, expecting him to have played it in its strong corner. A couple minutes later, he'd played a completely different card in the opposite corner. Sure, the 5-5 could be safe now, but it would be dominant whenever he played it. So instead of playing it for mere safety, he directed the game such that it would be a destructive attacker. Of course, he went on to win the game. Hand-making, like Triple Triad Network, I just don't have the records to prove beyond doubt. All I can say was he was an excellent handmaker who, unlike many good handmakers, didn't have just one starter type they'd always build around. So we don't have many examples of his actual play, but I've been posting Triple Triad puzzles on my Facebook page, and Delial, years after being an active player, Triple Triad Advance is now sadly demised, rest in peace, regularly answers the puzzles correctly. This position he got wrong. Perhaps the drinking didn't help Deli's play, but I think it's in fact a wonderful position for sussing out a player's style. Slash, a notoriously safe player, tried ideas in 8, the move that commits the least and keeps Red's power cards ready to activate vertically. A calculating player might look for the move in 2 and try to justify it, even though it can be comboed back. Delial instead suggested Cypher in 7. I quote, "Been drinking a bit, but Cypher in 7 seems pretty sexy," which is not in fact the win here, but is an incredibly difficult move to refute. Can you find the refutation? Feel free to pause and look. How can blue survive Deli's high-pressure, deeply synergistic move? I'm giving you a chance to pause here, but I'm now going to talk about the move. Most cards in 4 get comboed, and A9, 5-5, and 4, which doesn't, still loses to 8-7, 8-6, and 8. 8-8, 6-6, and 8 looks good, but doesn't work due to A4, 8-7, and 3. One strength of Deli's is he doesn't just see the first synergistic setup, he sees continuations. He's in no rush to make the big combo happen immediately. The tie is A9, 5-5, and 6, the hardest and least likely square to find a move in. Delial makes moves where your natural paths don't work, where it's very hard to find your way. His cards all work together beautifully, and yours have no good homes. Some examples of puzzles he did solve, and for you to try and solve if you like, so pause if you want. There's lots of tempting moves. There's safety in 1, an S formation in 5, securing 3 from 6, safety in 9. Which to do? Taking a sec to load, 1 sec. Deli knew which to do. Balthier in 5 seems too obvious. Obvious to Deli, maybe. Was it obvious to you? One more. And here should be a final puzzle, but my computer is running very strangely. Feel free to pause and solve when it comes up. Will it come up? Ah, may have just spoiled the answer. Sorry. So you can pause if you want to figure this out. Hopefully you didn't see the flash of the answer. Now we go forward. Vane in 9 seems pretty rad. He's right again. The key is that after any move in 5 or 7, Red blocks the other one, and then 8-7, A4 will dominate vertically in 6 and 9. So we need 6 and 9 to be occupied first, because neither of Red's cards is all that good for the finish in 5 and 7. So Delial had a fantastic career. There we go. But how do you show someone is the best ever? You can't just say how great they are. Lots of people are great. You have to show why that person is better than the rest, what they did that no other player equaled. I hope we're all on board that Delial was incredible, but I need to do more to show he was the GOAT. And the problem we have to overcome for Delial is that his win percentage and accompanying ratings are simply a bit lower than the other top players ever. In my most detailed ELO calculations, he never reaches number 1 in the world, while in prior versions he occasionally grabs the number 1 spot from Seto, but never for very long. How can someone be only briefly the best tournament player when tournaments were where the best play, and be the GOAT? How can he be the GOAT if others win more? It's not that his ratings aren't really high. He has more time than anyone rated over 2150, the second most time ever rated top 5 in the world, third most time rated in the top 3, the 9th highest final rating at the end of the site, the 8th highest rating average over his career, and the 8th highest peak rating. These are phenomenal numbers, but are they good enough to be the GOAT? Well, the numbers can be misleading. ELO rises over time, and Delial peaked earlier than almost all the players to eventually achieve higher ratings. It's perfectly reasonable to think he should rank a bit higher in all the prior scores if era adjusted. But the main explanation is this: Delial was inconsistent. I blame the booze or the poker. But he has more losses by quite a lot to sub-average rated players under 2000 than any other 2300 plus player. By one calculation I did, 3 of the biggest 4 upsets of all time were someone beating Delial. The reason Seto stays higher rated and that others achieved higher ratings is because they dropped fewer silly games. If being the GOAT is about consistency, then, well, Delial still is a case, which we'll get to, but it's a bit of a harder case. What if, however, it's about who's the best at their best, about who brought it when it counts? What did Delial do then? Delial beats the best. He's 6-0 in finals, 6-0. No one's even close to that kind of record. I hope you didn't spot this when I listed his tournament record, but Delial never lost once in the finals. He has the exact same finals record as Michael Jordan. Truly a remarkable feat. Let's just read through his record against other winners. The numbers in parentheses are where those players were ranked on the site when he played them. 3-0 versus Matt, 3-0 versus Kaus, 4-1 versus Diacon, 2-0 versus Kamikaze, 2-3 versus Kana, 2-2 versus Turds, 2-2 versus Yojimbo, 1-1 versus Serenity, 1-1 versus MC, 1-1 versus Cookie, 1-3 versus Slash, 0-1 versus Was Up, 1-0 versus Sujiro, 0-1 versus Nightwish, 1-0 versus Broccoli, 1-0 versus Racelin, 0-1 versus Sir Smokes, and 1-0 versus Asalaxi. That's an overall record of 29-18, or 62% against winners, which means he has a better record versus winners than some winners do against everyone. Of people that played him more than once, only 2 players, Slash and Kana, achieved winning records versus Deli. And keep in mind that Delial played forever. Many of these games were when his opponents were peaking and Delial was drinking. How good was Deli at his best? Well, through 2008, which is when he primed, he was a ridiculous 15-3 against other winners for an absurd 83.3%. But what about his rivalry versus Seto? I don't see Seto's name here. Well, I excluded Seto to look at separately. How'd Deli do when facing the player that kept him from the number 1 spot? Let's look. Delial versus Seto may well be TTA's most famous rivalry. There were very few times, around 7 ever, that 2 top 3 rated players met in a tournament, and Delial versus Seto were 3 of those 7. How'd the matches go? In the 2008 Triad Wars 6 finals, Delial defeated Seto to win his second tournament. Of course, as we know, Delial never loses in the finals. In the 2008 Irvine semifinals, Delial won again and went on to win his third tournament. In the 2010 Triad Wars 8 quarterfinals, Seto got his first win over Delial and went on to win his third tournament. In 2012, they played one last open match in Triad Wars 10, Round 2, which Delial won to take a 3-1 lead. In 2012, they played in the Closed Onion Night semifinals, and Delial won a 4th time. So in this greatest rivalry the Triple Triad Advance may have ever seen, I think we can agree Delial was comfortable winner. After Delial's first win over Seto in Triad Wars 6, Seto, the still number 1 rated player, said graciously, "Congrats, Deli. The better player won. Delial was not the most consistent, but when it counted, against the best, he came through. Against a reasonable picking of the best 12 ever, Delial was over 50% and still was against a reasonable picking of the top 5 of all time. There are, I believe, only 2 players ever with plus scores against that top group, and Delial is one of them. Now this data may be out of date, Yojimbo may have passed him, but last I looked, Delial was tied with Seto for most different top-tier opponents beaten, and first in most wins against great players. That's even more telling than it sounds. You know how you beat that many top-tier opponents? You have to keep playing them, which is to say, Delial did not have easy runs in his tournaments. These remain old numbers, but in 2012, which is before Delial won the site championships or Onion Night, so this may still underrate him, Delial was 83% against 45% in weaker opponents. It's good for about 12th all time, but like I said, inconsistent when some greats are in the 95 to 100% range, like Nightwish or Kamikaze. He was 65% against 45 to 65% strength opponents. Still good for around 12th all time. But against 65+% opponents, he was 60% himself, which is 3rd or 4th all time, on par with Yojimbo, ahead of Great Sephiroth, and way ahead of legends like Kamikaze, MC, Nightwish, Slash, and Kana. Delial beat the best. What more do you want? Because I've got more. Let's look at his tournaments. So first, we have Kate Sith, where you can see Delial beat SCL in the first round, but then he beat Fewer in the second round, a name I always have pronounced wrongly. But Fewer has, in fact, a remarkable record of beating top dogs. He has like 7 wins against elite players, which is more than almost anyone who isn't clearly a 60% plus player themselves. Then Delial beat Met, who at the time was at the very worst 4th best in the world. Then he beat Diacon Entite, who is a fantastic trade player, later won a tournament, an excellent opponent. You can't see it here because of the crop, but he then beat Kaus, the first tournament winner, in the semifinals, before beating Kamikaze, arguably the best or second best player in the world at the time, in the finals. So that's an incredible run, beating 4 truly elite players and the really dangerous Fewer. In Triad Wars 6, his run at the start was a bit easier. Shaj was more of a clan leader. Mains and Chris RC didn't hang around long, Sinister and other short-term presence. But he then beat Kana in the semifinals, and then in a 3-way finals, we know he's unbeatable in the finals, he beat both Met and Seto. In Irvine, he started again a little easier with Soki and Anth, but then had to knock out Yojimbo. Jadat is one of the best players to never win a tournament. He then beat Seto, the greatest rivalry we may ever see. And then in the finals, he beat Scythe or Serenity, who had a really incredible run in late 2008 and early 2009, and was just very hard to beat at that time. And Delial becomes the first 3 times winner. In the 10th Rhinoa, this one's kind of interesting because Delial's given good interviews about this tournament. He was paired with Roseman, who wasn't very confident that he could be an adequate support to Delial, but he really ended up coming through. And after Delial... So the toughest round they faced was versus MC and Ray Aminator in the quarterfinals. 2 very strong opponents. MC is a legend, and Ray was very, very hard to beat at this point in time. Really great player around 2012-13. And Delial, with ties counting, beat them both in a single game to get them to the semifinals, where they faced Amo and Mysterious Ass. And Delial, inconsistent, lost his second game actually to Mysterious Ass in a very short time, and needed Roseman to come through to advance to the finals, which he did. You'll see this was a team tournament. And then Delial ended up winning the finals. As he said, Roseman had no faith in himself to be able to beat Delial at the end, and the game kind of felt like it was over before it began, despite the fact that Roseman had played really well throughout. But Delial takes down a Rhinoa. And then we reach the 12th site championships, a shorter tournament. The site lost members over time, and tournaments went from 6 rounds up to 7, then down to 6, and at the end, down to 5. And you'll see here, he beat Pamela. Then he beat Fusion Cloud, also known as Kazdon, a really reliably excellent player over the years, who knocked out Dark Lord, who was just an excellent player at the end of the site's run. Then he beat Zulder in the semifinals, and of course, not even Yojimbo could stop Delial winning in the finals. And then, in Onion Night, a closed tournament, and Delial has repeatedly said, not a great closed player. He's wrong. He beats General in round 1, Raceland Majir in round 2. Raceland Majir won an earlier one of the closed tournaments, so that's quite a tough matchup there. He then takes out Fewer, who, as I've said, always a threat, who just knocked out Sir Smokes. Then, the final time they ever played, sadly it was closed, he knocks out Seto. And in the finals, he beats Turds. And I've done a lot of talking with Turds about triple triad and closed and knowledge beyond the basic formations. And he's really knowledgeable and thoughtful. And this was when he was at his best in closed, and I imagine just an incredibly tough player to beat. But of course, Delial does not lose finals. So here's my final claim for what I think the best case for Delial being the greatest ever is. Because I think there's never been a more all-around player than he is, and that no one's all that close. So here is a list of every tournament winner. And here is a list of players to win 2 different types of tournaments, like if you won a Rhinoa and a Triad Wars, or a Site Championship and a Special Edition. We're down to 13 players. If we added Sujiro and Karmazin, I think this would be a pretty good list of the best 15 ever. But what about winners of 3 different types? And we're down to 5 all-time great names. Only 5 players ever won tournaments of 3 different types. How about 4 types? Delial and Yojimbo are the only 2 players to ever win a Special Edition, a Triad Wars, the Site Championship, and an SE Rhinoa. But what about 5 types? Yep, it's just Delial, being one of only 3 players to ever win a closed tournament, and the only player ever to win all 5 types of Triple Triad Advanced tournaments. Oh yeah, and he also won TTN tournaments. He's won 6 different types of tournaments when no one else has won more than 4. He took down Essie Irvine and Kate Sith 2, Triad Wars 6, Rhinoa 10, Site Championships 12, Onion Night, and TTN stuff. No one has survived and thrived across more formats of Triple Triad, be it open, mixed, closed, or TTN's crazy shenanigans. If you look at all forms of Triple Triad, doesn't it just seem obvious that, yeah, Delial's the greatest there's ever been? So that's the case for Delial. He's easily the best all-around player. He sustained his brilliance for an incredibly long time, winning tournaments 9 years apart. No one else has a gap larger than 6 years between wins. He won 6 tournaments, earned 20 icons for quarterfinals, and won over 100 tournament matches. He has a 6-0 record in the finals, the same as Michael Jordan. I haven't even mentioned this yet, but he has the longest streak in Triple Triad history, 22 straight round 1 wins. He won when it counted, in the finals, and first the best. And through it all, I think we can all be quite sure his tournament success somehow understates how good he was. And he's got the following records. Best finals record, no one else undefeated is better than 2-0. He's 6-0, the only player to ever win all 5 tournament types, the first to ever win 3 majors, 22 consecutive first round wins, the next highest streak is 18. I didn't even mention this one either, but if we only include closed and partially closed tournaments in ELO, Delial comes out as the highest rated player, and he doesn't even think he's good at closed. He has the most wins against great opponents, the longest time rated 2150 plus, 3 straight Open Player of the Year awards, and 2 straight Player of the Year awards. He has the 2nd most championships, the 2nd most matches won, and the 2nd most icons. So I hope you'll agree. Delial, winner of SE Kate Sith, Triad Wars 6, SE Irvine, SE Rhinoa 10, SE Closed Onion Night, Fun Championships galore, Clan Wars 2008, Clan League 8, and countless other smaller tournaments I lack the records to, is the greatest Triple Triad player of all time. He's 3-1 or 4-1 against his great rival Seto, depending on if you count closed. He's the Michael Jordan of Triple Triad with a 6-0 finals record, but he's also the Roger Federer with a 22 tournament streak, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with his championship-winning prowess spanning decades, and the Michael Phelps with his absurd dominance across any form of Triple Triad you care to name. No one's even close to matching these achievements. Delial's the GOAT. Case closed.